Hi guys, it's Jen from Megovan, and today we're going to be talking about Arwen. We'll first talk about some of the differences of her character between the books and in the movie. After that, I want to focus on her relationship with Aragorn and explore the depths of her decision to give up her immortality. First, who is Arwen? Arwen is the daughter of Lord Elrond of Rivendell. That entire family is very important. They were pivotal in many important events throughout the history of Middle-earth going back about 7,000 years. We don't have much information about Arwen's early years. By early years, I mean during the first 2,500 years of her life. But what we do know is that Arwen traveled back and forth between Rivendell, where her father lived, and Lorien, where her maternal grandmother Galadriel lived. If we simply look at how Arwen is portrayed in both the books as well as in the last two films, she's kind of reduced to a hopeless princess waiting for her knight in shining armor to show up. Her relationship with Aragorn is the core romantic storyline of the narrative. I think there's still a lot to like and to respect about Arwen. Now, okay, so first of all, Arwen is an elf. Elves are these flawless beings who anything humans can do, they can do better. They have far better wisdom and hearing than men. They possess magical craftsmanship. They can build seemingly magical gear and equipment. You know, they cook special food like lembas bread, which is a nutritionist type of traveling food that stays fresh for months. Elves are also known for their beautiful features and for their grace. Tolkien tells us that Arwen's white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and that the light of stars was as bright as her eyes, and she looked very queenly. The first time readers encounter Arwen in the book and in the movies is around the sequence of Rivendell. Jackson throws Arwen immediately into the action, and it's Arwen who rescues Frodo from the Black Riders during the Ford of Bruinen sequence. Jackson made a good call here. If you don't know this, in the book, Frodo rides the horse alone. This horse belonged to Glorfindel. Glorfindel, he's an important member of Elrond's entourage, if you will. Glorfindel, he was sent by Elrond to search for Frodo, Aragorn, and the Hobbits, who were at that point being pursued by the Ringwraiths. So when Glorfindel found the company, he was their leader for a few days, but the Ringwraiths, they were still on the hunt for Frodo and the ring, and when the Ringwraiths were once again approaching dangerously close, Glorfindel put Frodo on his white horse and instructed the horse to take Frodo to Rivendell. In the book, Frodo is alone on the horse, and he's the one who lured the Ringwraiths into the Bruinen River, and he's alone during the entire sequence when Elrond and Gandalf commanded the great flood of water horses to wash the Ringwraiths away. This, to me, is an example of good adapted screenplay. Jackson exceeded the source material in this scene, and his decision to substitute Glorfindel with Arwen was good because Glorfindel only appears once. So I find it was better to introduce a recurring character like Arwen, who we will see multiple times in the movie. I love Tolkien, he's great, but Jackson outdid him on this one. It's a powerful moment for Arwen's character. She's very heroic in this scene.
If you want him, come and claim him.
It shows that she's a capable and skilled writer, and she has some fighting ability. Now, while Arwen's depiction throughout the film might be reduced to a beautiful elven lady in love with a mortal man, the sequence is proof of the contrary. Another element that's great with Arwen's intro is that moment when Aragorn tells her to stay behind with the hobbits, but she reminds him that she's very capable. And what she tells him is, I'm the faster rider, I'll take him. It's great. Arwen's very first line is also pretty great. It's an endearing and funny moment when we see her, she sneaks up behind Aragorn and she shows that she's not completely solemn all the time.
What's this? A ranger caught off his guard?
It's a nice, sexy line that adds some chemistry to their relationship. Jackson throws in a little bit of Arwen's backstory during this sequence as well. After the Ringwraiths are washed away, Frodo was still in bad shape and very close to death after being stabbed by a Morgul blade. It's at this moment that Arwen uses the elven power to try to save him. She communicates to the higher power and tells them, what grace has given me, let it pass to him, let him be spared, saved him. Now, while the details of this aren't super explained in the film, Arwen is communicating to the Valar, asking them to save Frodo's life. So with all of this, Arwen started off strong. She's this gorgeous elf, she's strong, she's witty, she manipulates rivers, and she can heal people. Some might think that it's a little disappointing that later on in the movie, she just mopes around looking hopeless and miserable. I disagree. I think, like Faramir, Arwen has strength of a different kind. It's not always necessary to put a character in the middle of the action just to show that they are strong. And I think Jackson and his writers thought the same thing. Jackson had originally included Arwen in the sequence of Helm's Deep alongside Aragorn and our heroes, which in and of itself was a change from Tolkien's novels. At the end, it was removed, and I am okay with this. Dominating on the battlefield does not do anything that matters. Take this, for example. In the books, the first description readers have of Arwen is through the eyes of Frodo. Naturally, he was taken aback by her beauty. But it was not simply her physical elements that impressed him. He was also taken aback by Arwen's intellect and spiritual essence. As the narrative continues, the Fellowship is formed, they head off to Mordor with the ring, and Arwen is not mentioned again until the Fellowship reaches Lorien. In the books, Frodo comes upon Aragorn, who seems to be having one of his long-distance telepathic conversations with Arwen. Then the only other role that Arwen plays in the book is that she is the one who woves the banner of Elendil that Aragorn is seen wearing in The Return of the King. This gift was not just any old gift, though. What is depicted on the cloth are 7 stars made of gems in the crown of Gondor, as well as the white tree of Gondor. The embroidery was her way of encouraging Aragorn to take the difficult path. We have to talk about Aragorn now. Aragorn's a badass. He's brave, he's educated, he's wise, and he's probably a super good boyfriend. But Aragorn was insecure about his bloodline and his responsibilities as the heir to the throne of Gondor, which was in desperate need of leadership and stability. Aragorn feared this responsibility because, like many of his ancestors before him, he was convinced that his line of men are weak and were unfit for this duty. So Arwen, she wove this piece of fabric together as a statement and gave it to her boyfriend as a way to give him courage, and it worked. Aragorn took it with him through the paths of the death, and he wore it during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. He also wore it when he announced that the king had returned. So Arwen operated behind the scenes, and it is thanks to her involvement that Aragorn did what he had to do to take his destiny into his own hands and become who he was born to be. Now, we don't get this full explanation of the importance of this banner in the movie, but this theme of Arwen operating behind the scenes is explored in the films. Remember, in the first film, it is Arwen who reminds him that he is a totally different person than his ancestors. It's during that moment in Rivendell when she tells him, "Why do you fear the past? You are Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself. You are not bound to his fate." When she says this line, she's pumping Aragorn with confidence and good advice. I also think that Arwen was very keen on Aragorn growing up there due to the fact that her father Elrond had put conditions on the marriage. That the condition was that Aragorn could only marry Arwen once he became king of both Gondor and Arnor, which would unite the northern and southern kingdoms of men of Middle-earth. Now, the union of Aragorn and Arwen is cute and all, but it's not your average love story. For an elf to give up her immortality is a pretty big deal, and Arwen's sacrifice is really noteworthy. As an elf, Arwen had the right to choose between immortality or a mortal life. She opted for immortality at first, and she was nearly 3,000 years old when she met Aragorn for the first time in Rivendell. During that time, Aragorn was living under Elrond's protection, and at that point, Elrond hadn't given him the tea about the whole "you need to become king or everybody will die" issue. Aragorn was smitten by Arwen from the get-go, but Arwen was not done at that time as Aragorn was only 20 years old. About 30 years later, though, the two were reunited in Lorien, and Aragorn probably started to look like that, so Arwen understandably was very down. She reciprocated Aragorn's love, and they promised themselves to each other. When that happened, Arwen opted for a mortal life in Middle-earth with Aragorn, giving up the chance to sail over the sea and live forever in the Undying Lands. This is a big deal, and I want to look at things from Elrond's point of view. Elrond knew that Aragorn had a long path before him before he could so much as look at the bloody ground. Elrond had one job to do, and that job was to harbor the heirs of Isildur while the line lasted, otherwise very bad things would happen. Originally, all the focus was on Aragorn's dad, Arathorn, but he was killed in battle, which was bad, but Elrond had a feeling that Arathorn's son, Aragorn, he was the one who could fix things. Elrond also knew that great doom awaited Aragorn and that he had to either rise above the height of all his ancestors or fall into darkness with the rest of the free people of Middle-earth. Now, Elrond also knew that if Aragorn became king, then Sauron that Sauron would have been defeated, and if that happened, the time of the elves would be over because their power was associated with the 3 rings that were given to the elves by Sauron. You might be wondering why elves are good folks if they are wearing, evil rings forged by Sauron. And that's a 20-minute video in itself, but I don't want to get into that. So all you have to understand right now is that the 3 rings were free of Sauron's influence, and he did not have a hand in making them. However, they were still forged by this guy called Celebrimbor, I believe, with the arts taught to him by Sauron, and thus the rings were still bound to the 1 ring. Elves, however, figured out what Sauron was up to before shit hit the fan and before Sauron could corrupt them. With the fall of Sauron came the diminished power of the elves, meaning that Elrond and the elves had pretty much no more business in Middle-earth and were therefore leaving Middle-earth once and for all. What this meant is that he would never see his daughter again, as going to the Undying Land is a one-way ticket. Like, it's a done deal. There's no going back. So when we look at Arwen's decision from the perspective of a father-daughter relationship that's been going on for about 3,000 years, it's a big loss, and I don't think we can begin to understand how it would have been to lose somebody like that, somebody who's been in your life for 3,000 years. So Arwen is not only giving up a cushy immortal life in the afterworld, and marrying Aragorn, she unites elf and man in peaceful love and harmony, and this is good. Up until this point, elves and humans coexisted together in Middle-earth, but they didn't get too much involved in each other's business unless it was absolutely necessary. Like, for example, the Battle of the Last Alliance, and of course the Fellowship of the Ring, when, Arwen gathered everybody and Legolas was involved. Another thing that's noteworthy about Arwen's relationship is that remember that she's an elf who has 3,000 years of wisdom under her belt. And to put it kind of bluntly, all men, even those who are as great as Aragorn, their men are beneath her. I'm not trying to say that Aragorn's a moron or anything. Quite the contrary. Aragorn, he's a Númenórean, he's wise, he's capable, he's noble, he's heroic, he's admirable, and he's a great ruler of men, and he's a good leader. But despite all of this and the fact that Aragorn will live longer than your average man, he remains a mortal man. No matter how skilled, mature, wise an elf is, mortality is something that hits hard precisely because death is not part of the hand they were dealt with. Elves refer to death as the doom of men for good reasons. Doom is a pretty strong and negative word, huh? Remember that the most evil place in Middle-earth is called Mount Doom. So the word doom is a pretty strong word to be throwing around when talking about the fate of men. For elves, and this is just how I see things personally, losing a loved one is something that hits hard because it's not something that elves are meant to deal with. Death is a human problem. It's not an elf issue, and I think Elrond knew this. And the idea that his daughter will have to navigate the grief associated with losing a loved one is what pained him the most, I think. I think Elrond feared that Arwen would have difficulty accepting death, and he was right. In the Fourth Age, after Aragorn's death, Arwen died of grief 1 year later. By choosing a mortal life, she does get to spend the rest of her life with Aragorn, and that's good. They were married for about 120 years, and it's possible that they'll meet again in the afterlife, but there's no guarantee as no one actually knows what happens to mortal spirits after they leave the world. But what she can be sure of is that she will never see her father, mother, grandparents, including her grandmother Galadriel, or any of her elven family again. I want to end things here, but I promised myself that I would not end my videos on the topic of death. So I propose that we end things on a passage that I read recently when Tolkien describes the love-struck Aragorn. Tolkien tells us that after Aragorn saw Arwen for the first time, Aragorn, he stumbled around for a few days and he kind of acted like a teenage boy in love. He was in such an infatuated haze that Elrond figured that he was totally smitten. Now, I can just picture Elrond not being able to roll his eyes far enough and thinking to himself, oh my god, the heir of Gondor, who I'm pretty sure is the only one who can save us from disaster, wants to fuck my daughter. Alright, I hope you guys have a good day, and I hope you agree with me that Arwen is remarkable and that, if nothing else, her love story offers a bit of softness and intimacy to an otherwise action-packed narrative. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you wish, like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help. Farewell.